I signed the contract in a Denny's parking lot off Highway 1. Clementine had the papers already spread across the hood of her truck, a white Ford with State Park stenciled on the door in green letters. 6 weeks, $1,500 a week plus housing. I didn't read the fine print. Didn't really care what it said at that point. Gary had let me go 3 weeks before. Budget cuts, he said. Just numbers on a spreadsheet. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just kept his eyes on his computer screen like the conversation was already over. I'd been at that Firestone shop for 7 years. Changed oil, rotated tires, did brake jobs in my sleep. Didn't matter. Nathan Padilla knocked on my apartment door 8 days after that. He had the notice already typed up, printed on cream-colored paper that felt expensive. 60 days, he said. But that was 2 months I didn't have rent for, so I started packing that afternoon. My truck had a quarter tank of gas and my bank account had 200 and change. That was it. So when Clementine called about the Lighthouse gig, I said yes before she finished explaining what it was. She handed me a pen. Black Bic. The cheap kind that comes in a bag of 50. Initial here, she said, tapping a line with her finger. And here. Signature at the bottom. The paper rattled a little in the wind. I could smell the ocean from where we stood, that cold salt smell that gets into everything. I signed. My handwriting looked shaky. I figured it was just the wind. Clementine folded the contract into thirds, slipped it into a manila envelope, and nodded toward the passenger door. Get in, she said. I'll drive you down now. I grabbed my duffel from the bed of my truck. Everything I still owned fit in one bag. Wasn't sure if that was efficient or just depressing. The state truck smelled like coffee and old maps. Clementine drove with both hands on the wheel, her eyes on the road, not talking. I didn't mind. I looked out the window and watched the coastline roll past. Highway 1 curves down the coast in a way that makes you think about how small you are. Ocean on one side, cliffs on the other, and nothing but road in between. We passed Bixby Bridge, past a couple of pullouts where tourists were taking pictures. The day was gray, flat light, no shadows. Generator runs on propane, Clementine said after maybe 20 minutes of silence. Tank's full. You'll need to start it at 1700 every day. Runs until 0600. There's a checklist in the keeper's house. I nodded. 1700. 5 p.m. I could handle that. Daily responsibilities are on the same sheet, she went on. Grounds inspection, light maintenance, log any damage or unusual activity. It's not complicated. Got it. You stay on site at night, that's non-negotiable. I glanced at her. How come? She didn't answer right away, just kept her eyes on the road. Liability, she said finally. And the light needs to be operational. If something goes wrong, you're there to fix it. That sounded reasonable enough. I didn't push. We drove for another 15 minutes. The road got narrower, the cliffs steeper. I saw a sign for Point Sur, but we didn't turn yet. Clementine slowed down, checking her mirrors, then pulled onto a gravel access road I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't looking for it. The gate was old steel, painted green a long time ago. Most of the paint had flaked off. Clementine stopped the truck and left it running while she got out, unlocked the gate with a key from a ring on her belt, and pushed it open. It scraped against the gravel. She drove through, stopped again, locked it behind us. "You'll have your own keys," she said when she got back in. We kept going. The road curved around the base of a rocky hill, and then I saw it. The lighthouse, tall and white, perched on a headland that jutted out into the ocean like it was trying to get away from the land. The keeper's house sat lower down, a square building with peeling paint and a roof that looked newer than the rest of it. Clementine parked near the house and killed the engine. "Wait here," she said. She came back a minute later with a small cardboard box, set it on the dashboard between us, and started pulling things out. Keys first, 3 of them on a steel ring. She pointed to each one. Main house, lantern room, Generator shed. Then a handheld radio. Black plastic, scuffed up, with a coiled antenna and a belt clip. VHF, she said. Channel 16. Coast Guard monitors it. So do we, when we're in range. You have an emergency, you call. I took the radio. It was heavier than I expected. Then she pulled out a laminated card, about the size of an index card, maybe a little bigger. The edges were worn smooth, like it had been handled a lot. She held it for a second before handing it over. Last guy quit midweek, she said. Mailed this back with shaking hands. I looked at the card. There was text on it, printed in a small font. Instructions, maybe. I didn't read it right then. Just turned it over. The back was blank. What happened to him? Clementine didn't answer. She opened her door and stepped out. I followed. The wind hit me first, strong and cold, coming straight off the ocean. I zipped my hoodie up and shoved the card into my pocket with the keys and the radio. Clementine walked toward the lighthouse without waiting. I kept up. The door was heavy wood, painted white, with brass hardware that had gone green. She unlocked it and stepped inside. I followed her into a narrow hallway that smelled like dust and something else. Salt, maybe. Or mildew. She didn't give me a tour. Just walked straight through to a spiral staircase in the center of the building and started climbing. The steps were iron, painted black, and they rang under our boots. We went up 3 flights. My legs started to burn a little. Clementine didn't slow down. At the top was another door, smaller, with a round window. She pushed it open and the wind roared in. The lantern room. It was all glass and iron, a circular space maybe 10 feet across. The light itself sat in the center, a massive lens made of curved glass panels that caught what little daylight there was and threw it back in fragments. Beautiful, in a cold mechanical way. Clementine stepped to the side and pointed at a metal switch box mounted to the wall. Manual override, she said. Generator fails, you flip this. It'll run on battery backup for 6 hours, enough time to call it in and get someone out here. I looked at the switch. Red handle, down position. Then she turned and gestured out toward the ocean. There wasn't much to see. Gray water, gray sky, a line of white foam where the waves broke against the rocks below. You follow what's on the card, she said. Her voice was quieter now, not soft, just careful. Manual's in the house if you need it, but the card matters more. I wanted to ask why. Wanted to ask what the last guy saw that made him quit, but Clementine was already heading back down the stairs, and I got the feeling she wouldn't answer even if I did ask. I followed her down. She walked me back to the keeper's house, showed me where the propane tank was, where the generator shed sat behind a low concrete wall. Then she got in her truck. Radio check every morning at 0800, she said through the open window. Don't miss it. I won't. She put the truck in gear, then stopped, looked at me. You need to leave. You call, she said. Don't just walk off. People get hurt that way. I nodded. She drove off. I watched the dust settle behind her tires, listened to the engine fade, and then it was just me and the wind. I walked back inside the lighthouse. Didn't go up to the lantern room again. Just stood in the hallway for a minute, feeling the weight of the keys in my pocket, the radio on my belt. I pulled out the laminated card, read the first line. Then I kept going, heading deeper into the building, knowing I was taking the job but not knowing what I'd just agreed to follow. The kitchen was smaller than I expected. Just a galley-style setup with a 2-burner electric stove, a dented white refrigerator that hummed louder than it should have, and a sink with separate hot and cold taps that looked original to the building. Probably 1930s or 40s. The countertop was that old laminate stuff, chipped at the edges, and there was a single window over the sink looking out toward the access road. I pulled the card from my pocket and set it on the counter. The laminate was worn smooth at the edges, kind of yellowed. Someone had handled this thing a lot. I turned it over once, checked the blank side again, then flipped it back. 5 lines, all caps, small print but readable. Light the beacon, at sunset, no matter what. That was the first one. Simple enough. I figured that's what Clementine meant about 1700 hours, though sunset wasn't exactly a fixed time. Probably meant civil twilight or whatever the official lighthouse standard was. There had to be a manual somewhere that explained it. Second line. If the lens stalls at 3:12 am, keep your eyes closed until it turns again. I read that one twice. 3:12, specific time. And the lens could stall, apparently. That part made sense. Old mechanical equipment, rotating gears, things wore out, but keeping my eyes closed. That was the weird part. I didn't love it, but I'd worked enough night shifts to know that bright lights could mess with your vision if you weren't careful. Maybe it was a safety thing. Don't stare directly at the lamp when it's stationary or you'd wreck your night vision for hours. I kept reading. Never open the interior stair door after midnight. Interior stair door. I'd seen the main spiral staircase, the one Clementine and I climbed to reach the lantern room. That was the only staircase I'd noticed. Unless there was another one. Basement access, maybe. Old buildings usually had service stairs. The phrasing bugged me a little. Not, don't use the stairs, but don't open the door. Different thing. Fourth line. At dawn, leave a cup of fresh water on the first basement step. Okay. That was just strange. Fresh water. First basement step. No explanation. I turned the card over again like maybe there'd be more detail on the back, but it was still blank. I didn't know if this was some kind of superstition thing or a practical task I didn't understand yet. Moisture control, maybe. Humidity management. Didn't make much sense, but I'd done weirder stuff at the Firestone shop. Once had to leave a pan of kitty litter in a guy's trunk to absorb the smell of spilled bait shrimp. Worked too, last line. Don't read the red notebook when the fog is in. I looked up from the card and glanced around the kitchen. No notebook in sight, red or otherwise. Just the humming fridge, the chipped counter, a wooden table with 2 chairs that didn't match, and a rack of old coffee mugs hanging on hooks near the stove. When the fog is in. Not when it's foggy, but when the fog is in. Like it was a thing that entered the building. I set the card down and rubbed my face. My hands smelled like the steering wheel of my truck and the dust from Clementine's dashboard. I was tired. That was part of it. Hadn't slept great the last few nights, staying on a friend's couch in Salinas after Nathan handed me the eviction notice. The kind of couch that was too short and had a spring that jabbed you in the ribs if you rolled the wrong way. I read the rules one more time, start to finish, then put the card back in my pocket. 1700 hours was still a few hours off. Plenty of time to look around. The first evening felt normal enough. I mean, the place was old and kind of run down, but it wasn't scary or anything, just a building. I'd worked in worse. The Firestone shop had rats in the back office and a bathroom that flooded every time it rained hard. This was cleaner than that, honestly. I started outside, walking the perimeter of the lighthouse and the keeper's house. Clementine had mentioned storm repairs, and I wanted to see what that meant. The wind was still strong, coming straight off the ocean. Cold enough that I kept my hood up and my hands in my pockets. The lighthouse itself looked solid. White paint was peeling in some spots, showing older layers underneath, but the structure was intact. No cracks in the masonry that I could see. The rocks below were brutal, though, sharp and black, covered in foam where the waves hit. I didn't get too close to the edge. The keeper's house had newer shingles on the roof, dark gray asphalt ones that didn't match the age of the building but looked functional. A few of the windows had been resealed recently. I could tell by the clean bead of caulk that hadn't weathered yet. Someone had put work into this place, just not everywhere. Around the back I found the generator shed, low concrete wall, metal roof, heavy padlock on the door. I used one of the keys from the ring and opened it up. Inside was a diesel generator, probably 20 kilowatts, sitting on a rubber mat with a fuel line running to a tank bolted to the floor. Everything smelled like diesel and old grease. I checked the tank gauge, 3/4 full. The generator looked maintained, clean oil, no leaks, air filter wasn't clogged. Somebody knew what they were doing. I locked it back up and kept walking. The stair tower damage was harder to find. I had to go back inside the lighthouse and really look. The main spiral staircase seemed fine, but when I checked the walls near the base, I saw it. Hairline cracks running up from the floor, branching out near the second landing. Fresh cracks, too. The plastered dust on the steps hadn't been swept yet. Structural movement, probably. Wind load or settling, maybe both. I didn't know enough about masonry to say if it was dangerous, but I could see why they'd want someone on site while they waited for a crew to assess it. If the cracks spread or the tower shifted, they'd need to know right away. I took a photo with my phone. No signal, but the camera still worked. After that, I went back to the keeper's house and set up a sleeping spot. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs, but I didn't want to be that far from the kitchen and the radio. The couch in the front room looked decent enough. Faded floral pattern, kind of lumpy, but longer than the one in Selena's. I grabbed a blanket from the hallway closet, smelled it to make sure it wasn't moldy, and draped it over the arm of the couch. The radio was still clipped to my belt. I took it off and set it on the coffee table where I could reach it easy. Then I sat down and waited. The fog rolled in around 1600 hours. I was in the kitchen again, looking through the cabinets to see what kind of supplies were stocked, when I noticed the light outside changing. It didn't get dark exactly, just gray, thick gray. I walked to the window over the sink and looked out. Couldn't see the access road anymore. Couldn't see the generator shed either, and that was only 30 feet away. The fog was heavy, the kind that mutes everything. No wind sound, no ocean sound, just silence and gray. I checked my phone. 4:03 p.m. When the fog is in. I thought about the red notebook. Hadn't seen it yet, but now I was curious. Probably in one of the upstairs rooms or maybe a drawer somewhere. I wasn't going to go looking for it, though. Not now. The rule was pretty clear. I closed the cabinet and filled a glass with tap water. The water ran cold and tasted fine. A little metallic maybe, but nothing bad. I drank half of it and poured the rest down the sink. That's when the VHF crackled. Static first. Sharp and loud enough that I flinched. Then a voice. My voice. Coast Guard. Coast Guard. Coast Guard. This is Point Sur Light Station. We have an active fire inside the lighthouse structure. Repeat, active fire inside the lighthouse. Flames visible on the second landing near the east wall. Requesting immediate assistance. Over. I froze. The voice kept going. Fire started approximately 10 minutes ago. Unknown cause. I've attempted to extinguish with available equipment, but it's spreading to the stairwell. Smoke is heavy. I'm evacuating to the keeper's house, requesting fire response and advising mariners of potential light outage. Point Sur Light Station. Over. Then static again. I grabbed the radio off the coffee table. My hands were shaking. I pressed the talk button. Coast Guard. This is Point Sur. Disregard last transmission. There's no fire. Repeat, no fire. I don't know what that was. Over. I waited. Nothing. I tried again. Coast Guard, Point Sur Light Station, radio check. Do you copy? Over. Still nothing. Just static and silence. I clipped the radio back to my belt and ran. I checked the stove first. Burners were off, cold to the touch. I yanked open the oven door, nothing inside. No smell of gas or burning. The outlets. I crouched down and checked every outlet in the kitchen, then the front room. No scorch marks, no heat, no melted plastic. I went outside. The fog was so thick I had to keep one hand on the wall of the keeper's house to navigate to the generator shed. Unlocked it, checked inside. The generator was cold. Hadn't been started yet. The diesel smell was there, steady and normal, but no smoke, no fire. I locked it again and went to the lighthouse. The door was still locked. I unlocked it and stepped into the hallway, pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, swept it across the walls, the floor, the base of the spiral staircase. Nothing. I climbed the stairs, checked the second landing. The east wall specifically, because that's what the voice had said. My voice, cold stone, hairline cracks, same as before. Plaster dust on the steps, no flames, no smoke, no heat. I stood there for a minute, breathing hard, shining my phone light on every surface I could reach. Nothing. I went back down, locked the lighthouse door, and returned to the keeper's house. My heart was pounding. I checked the stove again, the outlets again, opened the fridge, checked behind it, opened the closet, checked the couch cushions. Nothing. I sat down on the couch and stared at the radio. 16:45. I checked my phone again and did the math. Sunset was probably around 17:30 this time of year. Maybe 17:15 with the fog. Hard to say. Civil twilight would be after that, but the first rule said sunset, and Clementine had said 1700 hours. 15 minutes, give or take. I pulled the laminated card out of my pocket and set it on the coffee table, next to the radio. Light the beacon at sunset. No matter what. The voice on the radio had been mine. I knew my own voice. I'd heard recordings before, the way it sounded different than it did in my head, but still recognizable. That was me, talking about a fire that didn't exist, giving details I'd never said. Second landing, east wall, 10 minutes ago. I hadn't been on the second landing 10 minutes before the transmission. I'd been in the kitchen looking through cabinets. I stood up and walked to the window. The fog pressed against the glass. Couldn't see anything, just gray. The generator had to be started. That was the job. That's what Clementine hired me for. $1,500 a week to keep the light running and stay on site at night. The rules were part of it. She'd said the card mattered more than the manual. I looked at the radio again. If there'd actually been a fire, someone would have responded. Coast Guard, state parks, somebody. But there'd been nothing, just static. And when I'd tried to call them back, same thing. Nothing. Maybe the radio was broken. Old equipment, bad weather, fog interference. That made sense. More sense than my own voice coming through reporting something that wasn't happening. I picked up the keys. 16:52. I needed to start the generator. That was first. Get the beacon running. Follow the rules. Do the job. Everything else I could figure out after. I grabbed my phone for the flashlight and headed outside. The fog was worse. I kept my left hand on the wall of the keeper's house and counted steps. 12 to the corner, 6 more to the generator shed. The padlock was cold and wet under my fingers. I unlocked it, pulled the door open, and stepped inside. The diesel smell hit me immediately. Normal. Just fuel and grease and concrete. The generator had a manual start sequence. I'd seen setups similar to this at the shop. Check the fuel valve, check the oil level, prime the system, flip the ignition, pull the starter cord. Except this one had an electric starter. Easier. I found the switch panel mounted on the wall. 3 switches, main power, fuel pump, ignition. I flipped them in order and pressed the starter button. The generator coughed once, then caught. The sound filled the small shed, a steady mechanical rumble that I felt in my chest. I watched the voltage gauge climb. 10 seconds. 20. The needle settled into the green zone. I stepped back outside and looked up. Couldn't see the top of the lighthouse through the fog, but I knew it was there. The beacon would be warming up now. The rotating lens, the lamp, all of it coming to life. Light the beacon at sunset. No matter what. Done. I locked the shed and walked back to the keeper's house, counting steps again. My jeans were damp from the fog. My hands were cold. I went inside and shut the door behind me, listened to the wind start up again. Faint at first, then louder. The radio was still on the coffee table. I sat down and picked it up, turned the volume knob down halfway, then back up to 3/4, checked the channel, still 16. Battery indicator showed full. It looked fine, felt fine. I set it down and stared at the laminated card. 5 rules. I'd followed the first one. The others didn't apply yet. 3:12 a.m. was hours away, midnight too, dawn even further. And I didn't know where the red notebook was, so I couldn't read it even if I wanted to. The fog pressed against the windows. The generator rumbled somewhere outside, muffled and distant. I thought about the voice again. My voice. The details. Flames visible on the second landing near the east wall. That's where the cracks were. The structural damage Clementine mentioned. The reason crews were delayed. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo I'd taken earlier. Hairline fractures spreading up from the floor, branching near the stone, fresh plaster dust. The voice had known exactly where to look. I deleted the photo. I don't know why. It just felt right. The light from the beacon swept past the window. Once every 12 seconds or so. Steady rotation. The lens was working. I put my phone away and leaned back against the couch. The job was simple. Keep the light running. Stay on site. Follow the rules on the card. That was it. Everything else, the voice on the radio, the specific details about a fire that didn't exist, that was just equipment malfunction or interference or something I'd figure out later. I'd made the choice already. Light the beacon first. Trust the rules. That's what Clementine said mattered. The fog stayed thick outside. The generator kept running. The light kept turning. I closed my eyes for a second just to rest them and listen to the wind pick up again around the edges of the keeper's house. Everything was fine. Probably. I checked my phone for the time. 17:10. The sun was somewhere behind the fog, probably getting close to the horizon. I couldn't see it through the gray, but the light coming through the kitchen window had that dull orange tint that meant maybe 20 minutes left before full dark. The generator was running. I'd already done that part. I grabbed the keys off the coffee table and headed out. The fog was still thick enough that I had to count steps to find the lighthouse door. 12 to the corner, then another 8 straight ahead. My hand found the cold brass handle and I unlocked it, stepped inside, pulled the door shut behind me. The stairwell was darker than before, no windows until the lantern room. I clicked on my phone's flashlight and started climbing, keeping one hand on the railing. The iron steps rang under my boots the same way they had with Clementine. By the second landing, my legs were burning again. I passed the east wall with the hairline cracks without stopping. Nothing to see there, just stone and plaster dust. At the top, I unlocked the smaller door and pushed it open. Wind hit me hard enough that I had to brace against the frame. The lantern room was freezing. I stepped inside and let the door swing shut, cutting the wind by half. The lens sat in the center of the room, massive and still. I walked around it once, looking for the ignition mechanism. Clementine hadn't shown me this part. She'd pointed to the battery override and said the card mattered more than the manual. That was it. I found a metal panel on the west side with a hinged cover. Inside was a brass switch labeled ignition, and a smaller dial below it marked rotation. The switch was in the off position. The dial was set to 12. I flipped the switch. Nothing happened for 3 seconds. Then I heard a soft click and a flame caught inside the lens housing. It was small at first, just a blue flicker behind the curved glass. Then it spread, climbing up a wick I couldn't quite see, and the whole lens filled with light, bright enough that I had to squint. The rotation mechanism engaged with a low mechanical hum, and the lens began to turn. I stepped back and watched it complete one full rotation. 12 seconds, just like I'd timed from the keeper's house window. Then I looked out through the glass panels at the fog. It was pulling back. Not everywhere, just around the lighthouse. Maybe a 50-foot radius, maybe less. The fog didn't vanish, it just thinned out, like someone had dialed down the density. I could see the rocks below now. I could see the edge of the keeper's house roof. Past that, the fog was still a solid wall, thick and gray and unmoving. I stood there for a minute, watching the boundary. It held steady. The light swept over it every 12 seconds, and every time it did, the fog seemed to press in a little, then pull back again when the beam passed. I told myself it was wind. The beacon generated heat. Heat created air movement, and that pushed the fog around. That made sense. Or maybe it was designed that way on purpose. A lighthouse was supposed to cut through fog. That's the whole point. But I didn't really believe either of those things. I turned away from the glass and headed back down the stairs. The door latched behind me and the wind cut off. I counted steps on the way down just to keep my head busy. 42 total from the lantern room to the ground floor. I locked the lighthouse door and walked back to the keeper's house, still counting. 15 steps this time. The fog had thinned enough that I didn't need to feel my way along the wall. Inside, I sat down on the couch and pulled out the laminated card. First rule, light the beacon at sunset no matter what. Done. The beacon was lit. It was rotating. The fog had reacted, and I was trying not to think too hard about that part. I put the card back in my pocket and checked the time again. 17:32. Hours to go before the next rule kicked in. I didn't mean to look for the notebook. It was close to 9, maybe a few minutes before. I'd been sitting on the couch for a while, then pacing the front room, then sitting again. The beacon light kept sweeping past the window every 12 seconds. I'd started counting rotations without meaning to. 163. 164. I got up and went to the kitchen because I needed to do something with my hands. I opened the refrigerator, empty except for a box of baking soda in the back. I closed it and opened the cabinets above the sink. 2 mismatched plates, 1 chipped mug, a box of tea bags that looked about 10 years old. Then I opened the cabinet under the sink. There was a rusted pipe wrench, a half-empty bottle of dish soap, and a red notebook shoved all the way to the back corner. It was wrapped in clear packing tape, the kind you use for shipping boxes. Someone had wound it around the whole thing, covering the front and back, sealing the pages shut. I pulled it out and turned it on the counter under the overhead light. It was a cheap Staples journal, 5 by 7 inches, maybe 80 pages. The tape was old, starting to yellow at the edges, but still stuck tight. On the front cover, under the tape, someone had written in black Sharpie, "Do not read." That was it. No explanation, no name. I held it for a minute, feeling the weight of it. Not heavy, just a notebook. The 5th rule came back to me. Don't read the red notebook when the fog is in. I looked out the window. The fog was still there, pressed up against the thinned radius around the lighthouse. Definitely still in. I set the notebook back on the counter and stared at it. The tape made it clear this wasn't some casual suggestion. Someone had sealed this thing shut on purpose. And the rule didn't say, "Don't read the red notebook ever." It said, "Don't read it when the fog is in," which meant maybe you were supposed to read it sometimes, just not now. I picked it up again, turned it over. The back cover had more tape, no writing. The spine crackled a little when I flexed it, like the pages inside were dry. I thought about peeling the tape off. Just a corner, just enough to see the first page. Then I thought about the previous keeper, the one who quit midweek, the one who mailed the laminated card back with shaking hands, according to Clementine. I put the notebook back under the sink, all the way in the corner where I'd found it. I closed the cabinet door and wiped my hands on my jeans even though they weren't dirty. That was it. I didn't open it, didn't peel the tape, didn't even hold it long enough to get tempted. I went back to the couch and sat down. The VHF radio hissed. I grabbed it off my belt before the sound fully registered. Static first, then a voice. Male, steady, younger than I expected. Point Sur Light Station, this is Coast Guard Sector San Francisco on Channel 16. Respond, please. I pressed the talk button. This is Point Sur. Go ahead. Point Sur, this is Petty Officer Jerry Burton, Coast Guard Communications. We received a distress transmission approximately 20 minutes ago reporting an active structure fire at your location. Can you confirm status? I looked around the front room. No smoke, no heat, no smell of burning anything except maybe the faint diesel exhaust from the generator outside. Negative, I said. No fire here, no smoke. Generators running normal, beacons lit, everything's fine. Pause. Static. Point Sur, confirming you report no active fire at this time? Confirmed. No fire. I don't know who called it in, but it's not accurate. Another pause, longer this time. Copy that, Point Sur. Be advised we're dispatching a response unit for visual confirmation. ETA approximately 45 minutes depending on conditions. Please maintain radio contact and report any change in status. I pressed talk again. Understood. I'll be here. Roger. Sector San Francisco, standing by on 16. The radio went quiet. I clipped it back to my belt and stood up. 45 minutes. They were sending a boat. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen counter and headed outside. The perimeter check took 10 minutes. I started at the generator shed, unlocked it, stepped inside, checked the panel. Still running clean. Voltage in the green. No heat except what the engine itself put off. No fuel smell, no smoke. I locked it again and moved to the lighthouse. The door was still locked. I opened it and climbed to the first landing, shining the flashlight on every surface. Cold stone. Dust. The same hairline cracks I'd photographed earlier. I kept climbing. Second landing. East wall. I put my hand flat against the stone where the cracks were deepest. Cold. Solid. No vibration. No warmth. Nothing. I checked the third landing and the lantern room. The beacon was still rotating, 12 seconds per cycle. Flame steady inside the lens. I checked the battery override panel, untouched. I went back down and checked the ground floor hallway. The narrow closet near the entrance. The space behind the staircase, where old rope and a broken mop handle were shoved into the corner. Nothing. I stepped outside and walked the path between the lighthouse and the keeper's house, sweeping the flashlight across the gravel. No footprints, except my own. I circled the house, checking the windows from the outside. All sealed. No broken glass. I checked the propane tank and the hose connection to the generator shed. Intact. The only smell in the air was kelp, sharp and salty, drifting up from the rocks below. I walked to the edge of the headland and shined the flashlight down. Waves breaking white against black stone. Seaweed tangled in the crevices. Nothing burning. Nothing out of place. I turned back toward the keeper's house and stopped. The radio hissed again. I pulled it off my belt and pressed talk. This is Point Sur. Static. Then something that might have been breathing. Slow and wet, like someone exhaling through water. Clementine? I tried. This is Dylan. You copy? More static. The breathing sound faded in and out, rhythmic. In and out, in and out. I released the talk button and adjusted the volume. Still set to 16, still full battery. I tried again. Clementine, if you're there, I need a callback. Coast Guard's dispatching a unit for a false fire report. I don't know what's going on, but I need to confirm protocol. Static. Then the breathing again, a little louder this time. Definitely not Clementine. Definitely not Jerry Burton. Just that slow, wet sound, in and out, like someone was holding the radio underwater. I waited 30 seconds. The breathing continued, then cut off all at once, replaced by dead static. I clipped the radio back to my belt. My hands were shaking a little. I shoved them in my pockets and turned back toward the lighthouse. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the cliff trail, the narrow path that ran along the north side of the headland down toward the water. I hadn't walked that direction during my perimeter check. Hadn't thought to. The prints led across the gravel, past the lighthouse, straight to the basement hatch. I followed them with the flashlight beam. They were wet. Not muddy, just wet. Like someone had stepped out of the ocean and walked directly here without drying off. The edges were clean, distinct. Bare feet. No boots, no shoes. Just the outline of toes and heels pressed into the gravel and dirt. I counted 12 prints total. Then they stopped. Right at the basement hatch. The hatch was a square metal panel set into the ground near the lighthouse foundation, maybe 3 feet across, painted the same white as the tower, but chipped and rusted at the edges. I'd noticed it earlier during my first walk around, but hadn't opened it. Hadn't thought about it. I crouched down and shined the flashlight on the surface. It was slick. Not just damp, slick with seawater, pooling in the shallow dents and scratches, dripping down the sides where the metal met the concrete frame. I touched it with one finger. Cold, wet, salt smell. The footprints stopped right here like someone had stood on this spot and waited. I checked the lock, still engaged. The hatch hadn't been opened. I stood up and backed away, keeping the flashlight on the prints. They didn't lead anywhere else, just from the cliff trail to the hatch. That was it. I turned and looked toward the trail. The fog was still pressed up against the light's radius, thick and gray and waiting. I didn't go down to the water. I went back inside the keeper's house, locked the door behind me, and sat on the couch with the radio on the coffee table and the flashlight in my lap. The beacon swept past the window. 12 seconds. Again. Again. I didn't close my eyes. At 11:58, something rattled the interior stair door. Just once. A quick metallic shake of the handle, then nothing. I'd been on the couch with my eyes half closed, radio clipped to my belt, flashlight on the coffee table next to the laminated card. The sound cut through the silence so clean I sat up before I even processed what it was. The door was maybe 12 feet away, across the front room. White painted wood, same brass hardware as the exterior doors. I'd noticed it earlier, but hadn't opened it. Figured it led to a basement or utility space. Hadn't thought about it again. Until now. I checked my phone. 11:58. 2 minutes until midnight. I pulled the card off the coffee table and read the third rule again. Never open the interior stair door after midnight. Not, don't go down the stairs. Don't open the door. The handle rattled at 11:58, before midnight. I sat there watching the clock tick over. 11:59. The wind outside had picked up again, rattling the window frames. The beacon swept past every 12 seconds, casting that rotating glow through the glass. Midnight. The handle moved again. Slow this time. Deliberate. Someone testing the resistance, feeling how the latch worked. The kind of careful pressure you use when you're checking if something's locked. Patient. Like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world and knew exactly what they were doing. The door didn't open, just the handle, turning maybe a quarter inch, then easing back. I stood up, grabbed the flashlight even though I didn't turn it on. The handle tested again. Same slow rotation, same patient pressure. I remembered the third rule. Pulled one of the kitchen chairs over and wedged it under the knob at an angle. The chair was old wood, probably not worth much, but it felt better than nothing. Then I went back to the keeper's house bedroom, the one I'd avoided earlier because the couch seemed fine, and dragged out the heavy canvas tool bag I'd found in the closet. It had to weigh 40 pounds, wrenches, hammers, a pry bar, some rusted bolts. I set it on the chair seat, bracing the whole thing, even though the door opened inward and the chair wouldn't actually stop anything. Didn't matter. I did it anyway. The handle went still. I stood there for maybe 2 minutes, watching the door, waiting for it to move again. The beacon rotated outside. 12 seconds, 12 seconds, 12 seconds. Nothing. I thought about the bedroom. There was a mattress in there, probably cleaner than the couch, and the door had a lock. I could wedge myself in there, get a few hours of sleep before dawn when I'd need to leave the cup of water on the first basement step. I looked at the interior stair door again, at the chair wedged under the handle, at the tool bag weighing it down. Then I looked at the kitchen doorway. I could see both doors from there, interior stairs and the front entrance. If I sat at the kitchen table, I'd have a clear line of sight. I wasn't going into the bedroom. I grabbed the radio, the flashlight, and the laminated card, and set up in the kitchen, pulled out the chair facing the front room, clipped the radio to my belt again, and put the flashlight on the table within reach, aimed at the interior stair door. The card went next to it. I sat down and waited. The handle didn't move again. Not at 12:05, not at 12:30, not at 1. But I kept watching. At 3:11, grinding metal woke me up. I jerked upright, neck stiff from where I'd been slumped against the table. My phone said 3:11. The grinding sound was coming from outside, low and rhythmic, like gears chewing against each other. The beacon. I grabbed the flashlight and keys, shoved the radio higher on my belt, and headed out the door. The fog had pulled back again, just like earlier, leaving that 50-foot bubble of clear air around the lighthouse. I crossed to the door, unlocked it, and started climbing. I was thinking seized bearing, maybe a bent drive shaft. The generator had been running clean when I checked it earlier, but if the rotation mechanism was old enough, it could have picked up moisture and started binding. I had the adjustable wrench in my hoodie pocket. Figured I'd need to pull the housing and check the main gear. The grinding got louder as I climbed. By the second landing, my legs were burning again. I didn't stop. At the top, I shoved open the lantern room door. The lens was slowing down. I could see it. The rotation that had been 12 seconds clean was dragging now, the beam crawling across the glass like something was fighting it. The grinding sound was coming from the mechanism beneath the lens housing, deeper than I'd expected. I checked my phone. 3:12. The lens stopped, just locked up mid-turn, the beam pointing southeast. Frozen. I stepped closer, leaning in to see if the drive chain had come off the sprocket. That's when I saw the faces. Inside the glass. Pale, flattened, pressed against the curved panels from the inside like they were up against an underwater window. Blinking. Eyes open, then closed, then open again. Maybe 4 of them. Maybe more. The light was too bright and I couldn't. I snapped my eyes shut, gripped the iron railing next to the lens so hard my knuckles went cold. The second rule. If the lens stalls at 3:12, keep your eyes closed until it turns again. I forced myself not to look, not to open my eyes, not to check if the faces were still there, or if I'd imagined the whole thing. Singing started below me. Not outside. Inside the lighthouse. Down the stairwell. A voice. Maybe 2, harmonizing in something I didn't recognize. No words I could make out. Just melody. Low and wet. Close enough I could feel it in my teeth. I stayed locked on the railing. Something brushed past me on the stairs. Cold fabric against my leg. Wet skin, the smell of seawater and rot, trailing water that I heard dripping on the iron steps below, each drop ringing clear. I didn't move, didn't open my eyes, didn't turn around. The singing got louder, closer, right behind me now, close enough I thought I could feel breath on my neck. I checked my phone without looking, just tilted it up until the screen glow registered through my eyelids. Then cracked one eye, barely open. 3:13. 1 more minute. The singing swelled. 2 voices. 3 more. All of them inside the stairwell, climbing or descending or just surrounding me, I couldn't tell. Something touched my shoulder. I locked up, every muscle. Didn't breathe, fingers cold, wet, pressing through my hoodie like they were testing if I was real. 3:14. The lens jerked. I felt it through the railing. A hard mechanical snap. Then the grinding noise smoothed out and the rotation started again. 12 seconds. Clean. The singing cut off. Not fading. Just gone. Like someone had flipped a switch mid-transmission. I opened my eyes. The lantern room was empty. Just me, the lens, and the rotating light sweeping out over the water. I looked down at my shoulder. My hoodie was soaked through, cold and dripping. I checked the glass panels. Nothing inside. Just the flame and the lens doing its job. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, listening to the beacon turn, feeling the water soak through to my shirt. Then I went back down the stairs. Dawn came cold and gray through the kitchen window. I checked my phone. 5:47. The sky was that flat color that meant the sun was up somewhere behind the clouds, but you wouldn't see it for another hour. I stood at the sink and filled the chipped mug I'd found in the cabinet, then dumped it and grabbed one of the mismatched plates instead. Felt wrong somehow to use the mug. The plate was white ceramic with a blue stripe around the rim. No chips. Clean enough. I filled it halfway with tap water and watched it settle. The laminated card said to leave a cup of fresh water on the first basement step at dawn. It didn't say what kind of cup. It didn't say how much water. I figured halfway was safe. I carried the plate across the front room. The tool bag was still on the chair wedged under the interior stair door handle. I moved the bag first, setting it down quiet on the floor, then dragged the chair back toward the kitchen table. The door didn't rattle, didn't move at all. I stood there holding the plate with both hands, water trembling a little from my pulse, and pulled the laminated card from my pocket one more time to confirm I had it right. At dawn, leave a cup of fresh water on the first basement step. That was it. No explanation, no reason. I grabbed the brass handle, cold under my palm. I turned it slow and felt the latch disengage with a soft click, then pulled the door open maybe 6 inches. Just enough to see inside. The smell hit me immediately. Sweet and rotten at once. Not like garbage or dead animals. More like fruit left too long in the sun, gone to vinegar and mold. But underneath that, something else. Salt, maybe. Seaweed. The same wet smell from the singing voices in the stairwell at 312. I stopped breathing through my nose and looked down. Wooden steps. Steep and narrow, disappearing into darkness below. The first step was maybe 8 inches down from the threshold. I could see the grain in the wood, old and unfinished, darker at the edges where hands had gripped the walls going down. No railing, just the steps and the smell and the dark. I crouched and set the plate on the first step, right in the center, then pulled my hand back fast without crossing the threshold. My knees were on the keeper's house floor. The plate sat there on the step below, water still trembling. Then it went still. Not gradually, just stopped moving all at once, flat and smooth, no ripples. I watched it for maybe 5 seconds. The water didn't move, didn't reflect anything. It looked almost solid, frozen, but I could see it was still liquid from the way the light caught the surface. I stood up, stepped back, and pushed the door shut. The latch clicked. I put the chair back under the handle anyway and set the tool bag on the seat. My hands were shaking a little. I went to the kitchen and washed them twice with dish soap even though I hadn't touched anything but the plate and the door handle. I checked on the cup 3 hours later. The sun was higher but still hidden behind fog that hadn't lifted. I moved the chair and tool bag again. Opened the door the same 6 inches. The plate was bone dry, not damp, not half empty, completely dry, like it had been sitting in the sun for days. And around the rim, where the water had been, a thin white ring marked the ceramic. I crouched down to look closer without stepping through. Salt. A perfect circle of salt crystals, fine and even, exactly where the waterline had sat. Like something had drunk it all without disturbing the plate, without spilling a single drop. I reached down and picked up the plate, pulled it back through the doorway. The salt ring stayed intact. I rubbed my thumb across it and the crystals came off on my skin, gritty and dry. I tasted it without thinking. Salt. Just salt. I closed the door, put the chair back, brought the plate to the kitchen sink and scrubbed it clean. Then I dried it and put it back in the cabinet with the other one. My phone said 8:53. I clipped the radio to my belt and did the morning check-in. Coast Guard Sector San Francisco, this is Point Sur, radio check, over. Static for 3 seconds, then Jerry Burton's voice came through clean. Point Sur, Sector San Francisco, read you loud and clear, over. Same here, no issues to report. Beacons running clean, generator normal, over. Copy that, Point Sur. Stand by channel 16. Standing by. I set the radio on the counter and made the last tea bag I'd found in the cabinet. The water took forever to boil on the electric stove. I drank it black, standing at the window, watching the fog press against the glass. At 1:30 that afternoon, I grabbed the keys and walked up the access road to meet the contractor crew. Clementine said they'd be here today, probably early afternoon. She didn't give me an exact time, but I figured I should be at the gate when they showed up so I could unlock it and let them through. The job was roof inspection or gutter work, something routine. I didn't ask for details. The walk took about 12 minutes, gravel crunching under my boots, wind coming steady off the ocean, cold enough I kept my hood up. The road curved around the base of the hill and I lost sight of the lighthouse after the first bend. Just rocks and scrub and the gray sky pressing down. I reached the gate at 1:42. It was chained shut from the outside. Not locked with the same lock Clementine had used. A different chain, heavy galvanized steel, wrapped twice through the gate bars and around the post, secured with a padlock I didn't have a key for. The old lock Clementine had opened was gone. I stood there staring at it. Then I pulled on the chain to see if it had any slack. It didn't. Whoever put it there knew what they were doing. The gate didn't budge. Hanging from the chain, looped through one of the links with a zip tie, was a laminated card. Same size as the one in my pocket, same smooth, worn edges, same small font printed on one side. I pulled it off the zip tie and flipped it over. 5 rules, same as mine. Same all caps text. But the 4th rule had a thick black line struck through it, and below it in different handwriting, blue ink, someone had written, "Stop feeding it. You're making it stronger." I read it twice. Then I pulled the original card from my pocket and held them side by side. Identical except for that one change. Same lamination, same font, same everything. I looked past the gate, down the road toward the highway. No truck, no tire tracks in the gravel that I could see, no sound of an engine. Whoever left this had come and gone without me hearing anything. The keeper's house was half a mile from the gate, maybe a little more. I would have heard a vehicle. I'd been awake all morning. I checked my phone. 1:47, no signal, same as always. I folded both cards and put them in my pocket. Then stood there for another 10 minutes waiting to see if the contractor crew would show. Nobody came. At 2:05, I turned around and walked back down the access road toward the lighthouse. Fog rolled in at 4:15. I was sitting on the couch, both laminated cards on the coffee table in front of me, trying to figure out what the second one meant. The original said, "Leave water at dawn." The new one said, "Stop feeding it." Whoever wrote the note thought the water was making something stronger, thought I should stop. But the rules came from Clementine, from the state parks, from whoever ran this place before me and before the guy who quit midweek. The water wasn't my idea. The fog came in fast, thicker than yesterday, erasing the access road first and then the generator shed and then the space between the house and the lighthouse. I watched it through the kitchen window until I couldn't see anything past the glass. The red notebook was still under the sink. The fifth rule said, don't read it when the fog is in. But the second card said stop feeding whatever was in the basement, and the only person who might have written about that was the last caretaker. The guy who quit. The guy who sent the first card back with shaking hands. I went to the kitchen, opened the cabinet under the sink, and pulled the notebook out from behind the rusted pipe wrench. Still wrapped in packing tape. Still had "Do Not Read" in Sharpie on the front. I peeled the tape off slow, working my thumbnail under the edge, unwinding it in long strips that stuck to my fingers. The adhesive left residue on the cover, but the notebook came free. I dropped the tape in the trash and opened to the first page, dated January 9th. 3 months ago. Handwriting was neat, small letters, blue pen. First night, generator started fine. Beacon lit at 1728. No issues. Clementine said to follow the card and call if anything breaks. Seems straightforward. I flipped ahead. The entries were short at first. Maintenance notes, weather observations, generator runtime, normal stuff. Then on January 14th, lens stalled at 0312. Kept eyes shut like the card said. Heard something in the stairwell but didn't look. Rotation resumed after 2 minutes. Don't know what would have happened if I opened my eyes. Not going to find out. January 20th. Left the water again this morning. Plate was dry by noon. Same salt ring. I don't know what's down there. Don't want to know. As long as it stays quiet, I'm fine with it. February 3rd. Missed the water one morning because I overslept. That night something scratched at the interior stair door for 4 hours straight. Didn't stop until I went down and left a full cup on the third step. It took it in under a minute. I could hear it drinking. I stopped reading and looked at the kitchen. The plate I'd used this morning was back in the cabinet, clean and dry. The chair was still wedged under the interior stair door. I kept going. February 12th. The water's not enough anymore. I left 2 cups this morning, both dry by the time I checked. It's getting stronger. I can feel it when I open the door. The smell's worse, heavier. I think feeding it was a mistake, but I don't know how to stop now. February 19th. Clementine won't answer when I call. Left 3 messages. The card says to leave water, but I think that's wrong. I think whoever wrote the rules didn't know what would happen if you kept doing it. Or maybe they did, and they didn't care. I'm not staying to find out. That was the last entry in the neat handwriting. Below it, maybe an inch of blank space, then a new entry in different writing. Rough letters, black ink, shaky lines. Dated tomorrow, March 7th. Tomorrow's date. If you stop feeding it, it climbs the stairs. I shut the notebook. My hands were shaking. I put the notebook on the coffee table next to the 2 laminated cards and stared at all 3. The first card said, leave water. The second card said, stop feeding it because it makes it stronger. The notebook said, feeding it makes it stronger, but starving it makes it climb the stairs. And someone had written an entry dated tomorrow in handwriting that wasn't the last caretaker's. I didn't know which warning to follow. Didn't know who to trust. Didn't even know if trust was the right word for any of this. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows. The beacon was already lit, rotating every 12 seconds. The generator hummed behind the house. I sat on the couch with the notebook, the cards, and the radio, stuck between warnings I couldn't untangle, and waited for the sun to go down. The radio hissed at 4:42 p.m. and then cleared. Point Sur, this is Cook. Do you copy? I grabbed it off the coffee table. Clementine's voice came through steady, a little out of breath. Professional, but warmer than usual. I copy, I said. Dylan, I'm sorry. The chain was a mistake. Someone from facilities went rogue with the security update and didn't tell me. I'm in the truck now with bolt cutters. I'll have you out in 40 minutes. Relief hit me so hard I had to sit back down on the couch. My shoulders dropped. I hadn't realized how tight I'd been holding them. Copy that, I said. Thanks. Hang tight. I'll be there soon. The transmission cut. I exhaled. 40 minutes. I could do 40 minutes. I looked at the notebook on the coffee table, then at the 2 laminated cards beside it. Maybe Clementine would have answers. Maybe she'd know what the second card meant, or who left it, or why the previous keeper's handwriting looked different on the last entry. The beacon flickered. Just once. A quick stutter in the rhythm of light sweeping past the window. Then 3 knocks hit the interior stair door. Slow, deliberate, evenly spaced. Knock. 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 The same rhythm as Clementine's radio transmission. The same cadence as her breathing between words. I stood up fast, radio still in my hand. The door didn't move. The chair and tool bag held. But the knocks had been precise, timed, not random. I stared at the radio. Clementine said she was 40 minutes out. She said she was driving. But the knocks came through at the exact same beat as her voice. I clipped the radio back to my belt and didn't respond. The beacon settled back into its 12-second rotation. The door stayed quiet. I sat back down and kept my eyes on the barricade. At 5:18 p.m., headlights swept across the fog at the gate. I stood at the kitchen window watching. The sun was low, maybe 20 minutes from the horizon. Plenty of time to light the beacon if I moved now. The headlights were white and high. Truck headlights. They stopped at the gate and the engine cut. A figure got out. Dark ponytail, State Park's windbreaker, sturdy build. Clementine. She walked to the chain with bolt cutters in one hand, and that's when I saw it. Her movement was wrong. Not limping, not injured. Just wrong. Her shoulders didn't quite line up with her hips when she turned. Her knees bent a fraction too far to the side when she crouched by the lock. Her head tilted at an angle that didn't match the way her spine curved, like someone wearing a suit that didn't fit right, or a puppet with strings attached to the wrong joints. The radio crackled. "Dylan, I'm at the gate. Chain's tougher than I thought. Give me a few minutes." Her voice sounded fine, normal. Maybe a little strained from the effort, but nothing off. I didn't answer. She worked at the chain for another minute, then straightened up and looked directly at the keeper's house, directly at the window where I stood. The radio hissed again. "Hey, while I'm cutting through this, can you do me a favor? Unbar the interior stair door so we can check the basement together. I want to make sure the foundation didn't shift after that last storm." My hand went to the radio on my belt, but I didn't lift it. She tilted her head again. Too far, like her neck had an extra joint. "Dylan, you copy?" I stepped back from the window. Whatever was at the gate could coordinate with the radio. It could wear a shape I recognized. It knew Clementine's voice, her windbreaker, the way she moved, close enough to pass in fog and low light. And it wanted me to open the interior stair door. I looked at the barricade. Chair wedged tight, tool bag holding it down. The radio crackled one more time. "Dylan, if you don't respond, I'm coming down there." I turned the volume dial to 0 and clipped it back to my belt. Outside, the thing wearing Clementine went still. It stood by the gate for another 30 seconds, then turned and walked back to the truck with that same wrong gait. The headlights came back on and the truck drove away up the access road. I checked my phone. 5:31 p.m. Sunset in 15 minutes, maybe less. I stood in the front room, staring at the notebook on the coffee table. The previous keeper said, "Feeding it made it stronger." The second card said the same thing, "Stop feeding it. You're making it stronger." But the notebook also said, if you stop feeding it, it climbs the stairs. And the original rule card said to leave water at dawn no matter what. I picked up the notebook and flipped to the last entry again. March 7th, tomorrow. The shaky handwriting that didn't match the rest. If you stop feeding it, it climbs the stairs. I looked at the interior stair door. Still barricaded, still quiet. What if I just didn't light the beacon? The thought came fast and clear. The notebook said feeding made it stronger. What if the light was part of that? What if keeping the beacon off starved it out? I checked my phone. 5:39 p.m. The sun touched the horizon outside the window, a dull orange line behind the fog. I stayed on the couch, keys in my pocket, flashlight on the table, radio on my belt, volume still at 0. The tower shuddered. Not wind, not settling. A deep vibration that came up through the floor and rattled the window glass. Then something hit the interior stair door. Hard. The chair scraped forward 2 inches and the tool bag shifted. I stood up. Another hit. Harder. The brass handle rattled and the hinges groaned and the chair skidded another inch across the floor. The radio on my belt crackled even though the volume was off. My own voice came through. Older, strained, tired in a way I didn't sound yet. The light works like a lid. You take it off. Everything underneath comes up. The transmission cut. The door shook again, and this time the chair tipped sideways and the tool bag spilled wrenches and bolts across the floor. I grabbed the keys and ran. I made it to the lighthouse in 8 seconds, unlocked the door, slammed it behind me, and climbed. My legs burned by the second landing. I didn't stop. The tower was still shuddering, a low, grinding vibration in the stone that I felt through the railing. At the lantern room, I shoved the door open and went straight to the brass panel. I flipped the ignition switch. 3 seconds. Click. Blue flame catching on the wick. The lens filled with light and the rotation engaged with a clean hum. The shuddering stopped. I stepped back, breathing hard. And that's when I heard it. Water. Pouring. Fast, like a burst pipe. It came from below, from the basement hatch under the interior stair door. I moved to the glass and looked down at the keeper's house. The front door was still closed. The windows were dark, but I could hear it. Seawater. Surging up through the basement and flooding across the threshold where the chair had been. Then it pulled back, fast, like a riptide dragging everything with it. I saw the arm. Pale. Thin. Fingers spread wide and trailing black hair across the floor as the water yanked it back toward the basement stairs. Then it was gone. The door slammed shut from the inside and the water vanished. Outside, past the glass, the thing wearing Clementine collapsed. Not falling. Collapsing. Like someone let the air out. The windbreaker crumpled flat on the gravel and the shape underneath folded in on itself until there was nothing but cloth. I stayed in the lantern room with my hand on the railing and watched the beacon turn. 12 seconds, clean rotation, steady flame. The fog started pulling back. By full dark, the fog was gone and I walked up to the gate with the flashlight. The chain was open. Not cut, not unlocked. Rusted through. The links had corroded to brown powder and fallen apart in the grass. I swept the flashlight across the ground. No tire tracks, no footprints, no sign Clementine's truck had ever been there. The bolt cutters were gone, too. I walked back to the keeper's house and checked the interior stair door. It was closed. The chair and tool bag were exactly where I'd left them, still wedged tight under the handle. The floor was dry, no water, no salt, no smell. I checked anyway. Ran my hand across the floorboards near the threshold, checked the gap under the door with the flashlight. Nothing. I found the logbook in the bedroom closet behind a stack of folded towels that smelled like mildew. It was a standard station log, blue canvas cover, lined pages. Most of the entries were blank or just weather notes from years ago. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote everything. The false fire report on the radio, the breathing transmission, the faces in the lens at 3:12, the singing in the stairwell, the wet fingers on my shoulder, the water plate left at dawn and the salt rings by noon, the second laminated card at the gate, the red notebook, and the final entry dated tomorrow. Clementine's voice on the radio and the knocks timed to her transmission. The headlights at the gate and the wrong way she moved. The thing that wanted me to unbar the door. The shuddering tower when I didn't light the beacon. The seawater and the pale arm dragged back down the stairs. The collapsed shape outside and the rusted chain with no tracks. I wrote it all in plain sentences. No interpretation, just what happened and when. Then I tore the page out, folded it, and taped it to the wall next to the radio charging station in the kitchen. If someone came looking, they'd find it. If I didn't make it out, at least there'd be a record. At dawn, I filled the white plate with blue stripe halfway with tap water and opened the interior stair door 6 inches. The smell came up, sweet and rotten, salt and seaweed and overripe fruit. I crouched and set the plate on the first step without crossing the threshold. The water went still. I closed the door, replaced the barricade, and washed my hands twice. That night I lit the beacon at 5:24 p.m., 3 minutes before sunset. The lens turned clean, 12 seconds, no stall, no grinding. The fog pulled back 50 feet and stayed there. At 3:12 a.m. I woke on the couch to silence. No grinding, no singing. The beacon swept past the window right on time. I checked the interior stair door. No knocking, no rattling. The chair and tool bag hadn't moved. At dawn, I left another plate of water on the first basement step. By noon, it was dry with a perfect salt ring. I sat on the couch at 1:00 p.m. with the notebook, both laminated cards, and the radio on the coffee table in front of me. The original card said to leave water at dawn. I'd done that, twice now. The second card said stop feeding it. I hadn't. The notebook said feeding made it stronger, but stopping made it climb the stairs. The light worked like a lid. My own voice told me that. Older, strained. Like I'd been here long enough to know. I looked at the gate keys on the table. The chain was rusted through. I could walk up the access road right now, push the gate open, and keep walking. 12 minutes to the highway. Maybe flag down a car. Maybe call someone. But Clementine said if I needed to leave, I had to call first. People get hurt that way. And my radio transmission said there was a fire. The Coast Guard heard it. They sent a response unit. And something at the gate wore Clementine's shape and knew her voice and wanted me to open the basement door. I put the keys back in my pocket. The contract was 6 weeks, $1,500 a week plus housing. But I'd already made the choice when I lit the beacon instead of letting the tower shake apart. When I left the water instead of stopping. When I stayed inside while the thing collapsed outside. The rules weren't suggestions. They were the structure holding this place together, and I was part of that structure now. I picked up the notebook and flipped to the last page. The entry dated March 7th. Today. If you stop feeding it, it climbs the stairs. I closed the notebook and put it back under the sink, wrapped in the torn packing tape. Then I checked the generator schedule, confirmed I had 4 hours until the 5 p.m. startup, and went to inspect the beacon housing for wear. The job wasn't temporary anymore. I'd locked myself in the moment I chose the rules over the warnings. And whatever was under the interior stair door, whatever sang in the stairwell at 3:12, whatever drank the water I left at dawn, it knew I wasn't leaving. Wasn't.